How y'all doing? Good, good. It is really great for me to be here with all of you, but even better to be able to interview Miss Jackson today and tonight. As our host told us, we're interviewing Regina and talking about her new book, Unleash Potential. You heard a little bit of the background and the bio, but what you don't get out of the bio, and a lot of the people in the room know this, so I'm talking mostly to some of maybe the people on the radio who don't know Regina. If there was a Mount Rushmore for Oakland leadership, Regina would be on it. The thousands of young people who have been touched, the community and the neighborhood that has been touched. The people often talk about youth being the future, but few people have really put their shoulder to the wheel to show that like you have. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experience through this book.
You see, you make me cry. I got to talk. Thank you.
I'll stop then. I'll stop. I want to first ask you, what inspired you to write the book?
I have been thinking. 27 years is a long time. And I actually had a life before 27 years, but everything led up to now, right? And so I started writing a memoir. And then some things began changing at the center, and I was getting some calls from some of the kids and some of the staff, and I was like, wait a minute. If this isn't like fully youth-led anymore, or if they're making changes to things, I have to kind of save or stop in time, a time when the kids were doing everything. And I needed to share those stories because, everything is so fleeting. The conversations, the data points, all of that is changing all the time. So I just needed to freeze frame what I remember and highlight many of the kids whose trajectories were just off the charts. So it was my gift to myself, to them, and now hopefully to you all.
Thank you. You just talked about the fact that the book is part memoir, part kind of movement, part blueprint in some ways, like explaining how we all should be working with young people. Say a little bit more about how your own story kind of shape your vision and for youth leadership.
I didn't even know that the career that I had was a thing when I was going to college. I was a political science major, thought I was going to go to law school and, do what my parents were doing. I happened to be a choral fellow, and I had one of my assignments at East Oakland Youth Development Center. I was 21. After that assignment, they asked me to join the board. I don't know how many 22-year-olds are on board of directors, but what I learned there taught me everything that I wanted to know. I wanted to be inspired, I wanted to be empowered, and I wanted to ensure that what little I knew about life could be poured into young people. I didn't have a lot of mentors at that young age, and that's sad, because every young person ought to have a mentor. So when the time came for me to retire from the board or transition from the board and apply, there were lots of challenges. I think day one, I cut the budget almost $2 million in order to transition back to basics. I was not popular, but I knew that we were getting too involved with community initiatives and we were robbing the basic programs that, made the EOYDC what it was when former CEO Robert Shetterly envisioned it. That man was magic. Anyway, this is kind of a mirror in terms of what has happened and a launch pad in terms of what can happen. Really, when we identify young people as the subject matter experts of their own experience and make sure that they're central to the dialogue that impacts them. So, again, I was excited to do it.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that you say is that character is root. leadership is fruit.
Yep.
Say more about what that means to you and how it's guided your work.
Absolutely. So if anybody knows my mama, white lies were not allowed in the house. She was an attorney. And thankfully, I was mentored by people with strong integrity, people like Daniel Bogan Jr., who served with humility and service. We look at character really as a compass. It shows you what can be done when you make good decisions, ones that take young people or take people in mind. I mean, we are at a time where what's going on is unsustainable. And it's absolutely, it's absolutely not rooted in equity. So when you look at how people treat folks when they have nothing to benefit from, that's critically important. And when we instill that into young people about making good decisions, taking a look at consequences before they take the action, that's where the character shows up best. And the fruit, man, that is young people who are leading with integrity, empathy, and action. They're powerful.
So, I mean, these are all kind of some opening reflections that I wanted the folks to hear about, the kind of ground them and kind of the background behind the book. And I want to talk about some other stuff in a minute and ask you a few other questions, but I want to go off script for a minute. Because what you were able to do and build at ELYDC is unique. There aren't a lot of people who can have the kind of care and relationship that you have with the young people and with their families, and build an organization, handle all of the politics that are associated with running an organization in the neighborhood and having to deal with City Hall and manage a building. Like those, all that doesn't usually reside in one person. So just say a little bit about kind of how'd you do that? What were the things that grounded you when you were doing all of that work?
I'm not sure that I knew I could do it, but the never say die and I'm going to give it my best shot was always the mantra. What you all don't know is that Fred saved me while I was building that building. I was being stalked. I was having all kinds of challenges. And thank goodness you had a dedicated, resourceful city administrator who could help me put it all together. That said, when you love a community, there's nothing you won't do for it. And so as the challenges came my way, you know, I was like, I'm built for this. Mm-hmm. You know, my father was mentored by Paul Robeson. So I'm thinking about what he'd be saying from on high, right? Mm-hmm. But you talk about having the good fortune to come from the stock of people that worked hard and weren't expecting rewards. When I looked into the faces of my young people, they deserved the world. They didn't always know it. They didn't always think it. So as the challenges came my way, I just kind of tackled them one at a time. Was I tired? Yes. People ask me often, well, how do you do the work-life balance? I'm like, I don't know how to spell that. But if what you really want to do is make change, that should not necessarily be your goal. And I don't know who's going to come after me later. But what I wanted to do was give young people a chance by creating great programs that would inspire and empower and challenge them. Because so often, when you tell them that you expect them to succeed, you know, I would have kids that say, you're the first person to ever say that to me. And I'm like, that's too bad. You know, your teachers ought to be saying it from kindergarten on up. But that said, they also didn't know they could do what they did. And so you give them the power of possibility. And then when you show them they can do something, like write curriculum and teach a class, or go to the Olympics, be an Olympian or track and field champion or be the first in their family to go to college and they go all the way up to getting a PhD. What they do is they're able to look at other things that they think they can't do. And now they can stand up straighter and they can tackle it. And usually they make it.
You talked about your father being mentored by Paul Robeson, and that's a good bridge because I want to talk about mentorship.
Okay.
Last month, I didn't know this, was National Mentorship Month. How do you define mentorship, first of all? And what distinguishes transformational mentorship from transactional membership?
He's coming out with the zingers tonight. I define mentorship in believing in someone, in listening to someone, and every now and then asking a few questions and helping them to guide a path. Now, nobody's too old to be mentored, so there's no age limit, right? But I look at transaction, and when people look into emotional intelligence, they're like, oh, I'm self-reliant, I'm self-assured, I'm self-this. And it's those people that are the transactional folks. They don't even know. Transaction may help you open a door, but it's transformation that allows you to get that person through the door, walking held high with dignity and respect. It's not built overnight, and it's usually got to have long-term commitment from the mentor. So I'd say anybody looking to mentor, it's not a one-day, week, month, or even year kind of assignment. It's the whole enchilada, as they would say. I would meet young people, especially where they were, because, again, they didn't have a lot of sense that anybody would listen to them or see them or hear them. And so that's where you start. And, I'm actually tired of, the rescue stories. If you want to be a mentor, what you're going to do is help them reimagine life, usually by asking questions, not by telling them what you think, right? And a lot of people do that, right? But what you do is you change young people's trajectory, and that helps them to believe that they can change the world.
Trajectory. You mentored a lot of young people. Can you share one of those moments where you saw somebody's trajectory change?
Wow. I just need everybody to know that my job is the best job that you could ever have. These young people give me way more than I've ever given them. And I will speak to one person because it's a little bit more recent. I think I met him when he was 14. And through a college tour, he decided that he wanted to go to Morehouse. And then he became a man of Morehouse.
Good choice.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm a Morehouse mom. That said, I remember when he came back last year and he was mentoring people at EOIDC. He was impacting he was like the Pied Piper, right? He was impacting the youth instructors, the youth leaders, and even the kids. Well, he observed some changes in the program that he wasn't liking them. And that moment was when he called me and said, it's not the way I remember. And I said, well, what are you going to do about it? And he said, I think I'm going to write a letter and provide some examples and not judge it, but say, I want to help, put those things back. And that was the moment, because when you're making observations, it means that you care. When you are supporting them with examples, again, you are pushing a narrative that says, maybe this should be taken a look at. But when you go through taking the time to write and put the words, the pen to paper, to submit that, whether somebody's going to listen or not, that's the actionable part. That's the powerful part. And I'll have you know that that young person is in the room tonight. He is a graduate student at Stanford University, and he is already trying to change the trajectory of education, which we know is the most important thing as it relates to young people. They spend more time in school than they spend anywhere. And that is my young man over here, Dasan Ship.
I remember that moment too. So you've mentored thousands of people, but you've also trained and prepared other people to be mentors. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that work.
When you sign up to be part of a nonprofit, you kind of focus on the North Star and don't let anything get in the way of that. But not all mentors come from the nonprofit world, right? You want to go to the business, the labor, all that. And you have to ensure that they understand the value of mentorship. It's not a one and done kind of situation. But I believe that oftentimes people don't know what they have to give, how they can impact a life. And so what's most important to me is not the skills, it's the heart. It's like, what do you want to do? Do you want to impact? I'm not saying that you get to go and change somebody's life, do what I say do. No, no, no. You ask them what they want. Ask them what they need. Because most of the time, young people aren't going to ask for themselves. So once again, I share, you may not know this person in 10 years or 20 or 30. I will. But see, I'm the one that understands the gift. Young people are the gift. And so I say, steps are like this. Decide if you're going to be in it more than a year. Because if you're not, go play with pets and help the SPCA. I don't know. But if you really think that you want to align with somebody and help them walk through some of these doors, then go ahead and start. And you start not by sharing who you are, by listening. And then you ask some questions. And this is the supervisorial dream of life. If you are a supervisor and you don't ask questions, you are missing. Because that's how we learn. We don't listen with the end in mind or with the answers in mind. We have to kind of co-create them. And that's how you shift paradigms.
And maybe flipping this on its head a little bit, who are your mentors and how have they shaped you?
I have been extremely lucky. I was looking for mentors in college and nobody would take me. It wasn't until I finished Cal that people just kind of appeared. And maybe that's that adage of when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Mm-hmm. Two of the first people that I met were Mr. Dan Bogan Jr., and I actually dedicate my book to him. He has been and continues to be a mentor for more than 40 years. Now, that's a long mentorship. But I sit here and say, my mother is a mentor. Your mother was a mentor. Mayor Lee these are people that deliver humility and service all bound up as if there's no separation. Richard Winnie, city attorney of Oakland, was a mentor. And these people just kind of came to me and said, I want to be a part of what you're doing. So it wasn't, you need me. It was like, I had something and I didn't know what I had. Mm-hmm. But they believed and they spent time and they still spend time for those that are with us. Richard Winnie passed. And again, they know that it's the gift because I'm not the only person they were mentoring. And they did it well. And he never told, I'm going back to Dan, he never told me what to do. He just asked all the right questions. My father, too, is my mentor. I've been very, very fortunate. But you never stop needing advice and counsel. And I certainly appreciate that you were there for me and from the moment that you were there for me. You've never let me go. And I appreciate that too. So you are a mentor.
So you came to this space of mentorship early.
Oh, yes.
Other folks kind of wait till they are more seasoned and feel like they need to get more wind under their wings, and then later in life become mentors. What do you say to those folks who have done other stuff and now want to step into this space? What's your advice?
Get your ears ready. My feeling is if you are a seasoned executive and you haven't mentored, you have missed out, which means there is a value proposition that maybe doesn't exist. Maybe you don't see it the way it actually is. But you're never too late to get started because, as I said, you can have all the skills in the world, but if you show up without the heart, nobody's going to want to hear from you. There's no there. There's no end time. You can begin whenever you like, but the earlier the better. Because like I said, my young people think that I've done so much for them, but they have no idea how much they have done for me.
Mm-hmm. So I want to bridge now to like leadership and youth leadership, because the product of all this mentorship is you get to see people lead.
Oh my!
And do amazing things. But it starts with, I think, another phrase of yours, which is young folks are at promise, not at risk. Talk about that.
So the philanthropic language and the nonprofit language, they're like a different language from English, right? And I've said it a million times because that was the verbiage, underserved, at risk. But what those deficit words really do is they make young people sound like they're the problem. Whereas if we would just shift and have more of an asset-based conversation, it would suggest that they are the opportunity. You know, again, this is a time and space that I hope we look back on real quick and say, that was just a miss, right? We don't need rescue narratives. We need redesigned systems that are actually meant to benefit the people who are impacted most. I mean, one of the things I am so proud of is that when I left EOYDC, more than 60% of the professionals on staff were from EOYDC. I mean, I always thought I should be getting out of the way because I didn't grow up at EOYDC, and it had been a big miss for me. But having said that, we need to change the narrative on its head because we need to be hopeful in this world. Lord knows we all need some hope right now. Mm-hmm. But it's also about putting young people in positions to succeed. I remember doing a college mentoring program called Brotherhood Across America. And one of the young people I'd known since he was 15, I said, I want you to lead one of these circles. Well, he had just graduated from college. And he was like, I said, mm-hmm. You've had some experiences. You know some things. We want you to understand that you are a subject matter expert of your own experience. Oh, nobody have the experience you have. And I'm pleased to say that young man right now, let me see if I'm going to get his title right. It's not the chief people officer. It's something really important, though. And his name is Landon Hill, and his dad is in the audience.
I have one more question about leadership, and I want to touch on some other topics after that. What are some of the most powerful examples of like youth-led initiatives that you saw come out of EOYDC?
Oh, goodness. So the March Against Violence, which started many, many years ago, but it was a young person that said we ought to be doing this every single year. I remember we were headed on a field trip to Great America, and I heard this sing-songy thing in the background. It was just from 5-year-olds. And they were saying, ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around. So anyway, I turned around and I said, where'd you learn that? On the March Against Violence. And I said, and did you know that that was a song? They said no. And I said, well, you made it a song. In addition to that, I remember a science instructor teaching about Freddie the fish and how much challenge he had in being in the lake because of all the pollution. And that young person, her 9 and 10-year-old group decided as a part of that class to not only stop littering and help parents and everybody else they knew, but then to create an environmental protection program that then morphed into a recycling program. So it's always about protecting your community and understanding what you do or don't do can create problems. I could go on.
So I want to talk for a second, Regina, about my favorite topic that is under attack: equity,
Yes, sir.
systems, and urgency. And I want to start by asking you this. And I apologize in advance if I offend anybody. The Bay Area is unique because on the one hand, it is a hotbed for innovation, opportunity, wealth generation, likes to see itself as pretty progressive. And on the other hand, for a lot of folks, they either feel like they don't have access to that, or that when they really look hard at it, these progressive ideals aren't felt for them. Talk about like the importance of investing, especially in young people of color, and why we fail to do so at our own peril.
So interestingly enough, and if I offend anybody, I'm sorry, but I'm just telling the truth. Young people challenge us. They question authority. They want to take risks, and they should. I mean, there are some people that think that the Black Panthers weren't all that. I'm not one of them, because they challenged our government around health provision, food, all the basics, right? Which is what government is supposed to do. And so investing in youth, specifically of color, our kids are smart. They understand that they don't have a lot of power. And so therefore, community serving organizations, philanthropists ought to be making equity a budget line item. That's the only way you measure what you give, right? So if you give it, then you have a measurement for it, and that means that there's support. What's at risk is our democracy, our economics, and our humanity. Because we can't just walk on by and say that the homeless are the problem. Do you know how many young people are homeless? I see bags on the stage of classes at UC Berkeley. Folks don't get to eat, and we're in the midst of a food desert. Part of the reason I created a cooking class, for which we have many chefs that came out of the being adopted by Chefs of America, they can make their own way. But part of the reason I created it, because kids were hungry. And I wanted to make sure they got fed during the programs and before they went home, because I didn't know if they were going to eat again. We have to look at the end as the beginning. Our kids, if they're not nutritionally balanced, they can't participate in school. They're not listening, and there was a time, I don't know if it's still a thing because I'm a little old now, where we would give them, all the sugar, the donuts and this, that, and the other, and the early breakfast thing. And then we want them to sit still. I mean, some just stuff just makes no sense. And that's one of the reasons that I really, really appreciate Stephen and Aisha Curry and their commitment, specifically to Oakland, but around eating, learning, and playing, right? But getting back to equity, my father told me a long time ago this country was not designed for us. We built it, but it wasn't designed with us in mind, right? And the fact that so many young people have become entrepreneurs, one, because they need to make money in an equitable, honest way in order to go to college or high school or what have you. It's so important to lay a path for them because, when you look at the folks that have quote unquote made it, especially if they didn't make it with education, you have to build a pipeline of skills that starts really with building confidence. If they don't think they can do it, they can't do it. And if they think they can, they can. There's too much uncertainty. There's too much inequity. And if we don't redefine and redesign some of these systems, we're going to lose not just our future, but our now.
Yeah.
And young people, half the time, you say, hey, if you want to dream, let's make it a dream with feet. Tell me what you want. Tell me what you think you need. Now you have it. What are you going to do? And they take off.
You mentioned systems. I struggle with this, and I'm sure you have as well. I mean, you talked about the importance of making sure that folks are fed before they go to school. And you've laid out so many examples of how you have met people where they are one-on-one. How do you think about like the balance between kind of the programmatic work, the one-on-one work, the mentorship work, with the fact that these systems are failing young people and we need to spend some time figuring out how to make the systems work? Like, how do you figure out like what's the right balance of like the programmatic and the service stuff with the systems change and the policy work? How do you reconcile that?
It's a funny thing. One would think that I thought all this up and it just moved smoothly, right? No, you have to end up looking backwards at what ended up working out. I'm a big risk taker. And you can't always start with the end in mind, even though sometimes it's nice to do. There isn't the dosage and all that stuff that the philanthropy wants to talk about because there's no absolute cure. How do you know after 20 hours of talking to somebody and challenging them to dance or to run or to speak that they're going to be confident in it? We don't. But what I do believe is that when you develop relationships with young people, they trust you. And then when they trust you, they will go as far and as fast as you ask them to. The mentorship is the trust mechanism, right? And the exposure so that they know if I try this, I'm not going to die. So then maybe I can put more information into it. But the thing that is most exciting just happened this week to me to speak to creative solutions. And that is New York's mayor appointing a formerly incarcerated man to run a jail. We look at it in policing. We will hire the scammers after we've already, already imprisoned them. And they said, tell us how and what to look for, right? And there are so many people that need the second chances to be and have valued the subject matter expertise of their lived circumstance, right? I say you take chances. When I first had young people running the organization, it was because I had seen it done another way, and it was a freedom school. It was a great concept, but the execution wasn't there. And I was like, well, I think I can do something better. We'll see. And it, started small and grew big. And when they started learning how to manage budgets, their own personal ones as well as the org budgets, then they started challenging us. And I was like, okay. They said, well, we think that we ought to have some sweatshirts that say where we're from, that can start a conversation. But that was also a piece of cultural pride. How are you going to say no to that when it don't cost, it hardly costs anything? And I think I've lost my train of thought.
But you nailed it.
Okay, all right.
You nailed it. I want to ask two more questions, and then I want to get the folks in the room engaged here. They say that every journey begins with the first step. If somebody leaves here inspired tonight, but unsure where to begin or what the first step should be, what would you tell them?
Start. It's like, when you don't brush your teeth or floss it every day, it's going to come back to you when you get back to the dental cleaning. So show up the way you want to end up. If you want to be a mentor, talk to somebody that mentors so that you don't make mistakes because you don't know. Ask somebody. Tell somebody what you need. Take some action that's about somebody other than yourself. What's happening right now in this world of craziness is people are getting very afraid. They're fearful. And I get that. But if you sit in fear, you become paralyzed. So that means there's no movement, positive or negative, right? So I'm just saying start. Now, if you want to talk to me, that's fine. But I look around this room and there's some amazing people in this room, and I'm so glad you're here. You can talk about your experiences as entrepreneurs, as corporate entities who may or may not still have a job because, the cultural ethos of corporate, well, in most instances, is not about you showing up as your best self. They're just cutting and they ain't got nothing to do with you. So I would say, fear was a great motivator for me. As a young person, I stayed away from drinking, drugs, and sex because I didn't want to lose control. I'm here to tell you, I figured out one or two of the other things later. But the point is that if it won't kill you, try it. I'm not talking about driving like you in the Indy 500. I'm not talking about those things. But you have to take some calculated risks. Otherwise, you'll never know. We both know from civil rights, Black Pantherism, all that kind of stuff, that nothing changes when you ask for permission. You have to take the power. And that's what I'm talking about with young people. You have to shift power to proximate leaders. That's the only way we're going to grow. Because who gives away power for free? Nobody.
Yeah. I was in a meeting recently where I was asked, what have I learned about myself over the last year through all this turmoil? And when I thought about it, what came to me is I actually learned that it's possible for me to get discouraged. With everything that we are up against, the polarization, the attacks on the things we care about, the budget cuts, all this stuff, it's been pretty overwhelming. I didn't stay discouraged, but there have been moments. What gives you hope right now?
Well, I don't know the end of the story, but I know if you don't get started, you can't make impact. And if you make impact, you can make change, and so on and so forth. Now, I have been discouraged. I didn't tell anybody about it. But when you came to rescue me, I have been discouraged. I was being stalked. I was about to lose a $12 million renovation and expansion deal. And I had been working on it for 2 years, and I was about to see it crash and burn. And you rescued me. Somebody always shows up, and I don't know if people are religious or whatever, but to me, that's God. You can't plan for how he shows up, or she. And I just sit here and say that, we fought so much for civil rights, and that wasn't the beginning, right? And then we gained so much. And then we lost again, and then we gained again. And it's always a cycle. I'm hoping our cycle would end tomorrow in terms of where we are right now. But as leaders in whatever industry we are, and you don't have to be the CEO to be a leader, it really is your job to show that there is hope. And we're not at the end of the tunnel. No, we're in the process. And we need to believe that things are going to get better, because why are we living? But we have to play a part, play a role in letting somebody know it's not always going to be this bad, because we know that. It's always about shifts. And you were so damn powerful. I mean, you give people light just by acknowledging and recognizing their pains and creating funding priorities to address them.
All right. Thank you. I want to open it up in a second. But before I do that, I know you gave a shout out to Dasan, but I know there are others in the room.
Absolutely.
So who are they?
Okay, so I've got one of my mothers, Marta Tovar, and her daughter, Giselle, who's getting ready to go to college. I've got Heaven and Corday here. Stephanie, who is working on the MCAT to go to medical school. I got Brazil, who I think is going to go into the Choral Graduate Fellowship Program. If you listen in choral, she's amazing. I've got Brent. I can't see everything. Brent, who is next to you? Brent, who is next to you? Oh, okay. Look, if I haven't shouted you out, who are one of my kids? Oh, Queen Imina, who just graduated from the Emerge program. She's about to be a politician. And is there anybody else? Because the lights are really... Oh, Maya, thank you. Hi, baby. I'm going to give you a hug later. Thank you for being here. And then there's a lot of my friends here, fellow police commissioners here, other parents, Jamel. And Paula, foundation board member. Yeah, so forgive me because I'm going to miss somebody. Derek, my OG from high school. Where are you at?
Derek,
Okay.
right? He's over there.
Okay, home with chicken and waffles, guys. So forgive me if I didn't shout you out, but all very important people. All
Round of
doing great
applause for
things.
them, please.
Oh, another parent of mine, Stephanie.
All right, Mark, where's the microphone?
One of the biggest lessons that I learned from you that I still carry with me every single day is you gotta teach people how to treat you. Can you talk about that lesson, the power of that advice, especially for young people, and why learning to advocate for yourself early can be so transformative?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah, that's my colleague over there. It took me a long time to actually put in place how to ensure that I could teach people how to treat me. And one of the things I did was I just stopped reacting. If they disrespected me, I didn't always have to tell them that because they already knew. The point that I needed to make was that I'm not going to breathe your air, right? It's the same thing with the police commission. 83% of the citizens wanted us, but the city did not. I was like, how is this possible? You should be listening to the people you're supposed to serve. Well, we're seeing that on lots of different levels. They just forgot who elected them. And so young people, they get taken advantage. We don't see them. We don't talk to them. We expect the worst of them. And so for them to say, in the words of Reverend Jackson, I am somebody, you don't have to take the disrespect. Now, sometimes you don't have the words or the power to say, you have just disrespected me and I'm walking away. But after a while, when you see other people model it, you can get there, even if you're talking to your parents. Because as parents, sometimes we don't treat our children very well either. Thank you.
I told you I'm holding on to this.
Okay. Hi, Regina.
Hi.
You said the word parents, and that's the perfect segue to my question, because I know that, like me, you are a boy parent or a young man parent. And often we have so many people in so many different circles listening to us, admiring us, accepting our wisdom. But our kids at home, I'm talking about, think we're, So that's, as you were talking about how you mentor youth at EOYDC, I was thinking, maybe I should try some of this with my son. But what I want to ask you is, how did you balance being a mom and mentor to thousands of kids with raising your own sons?
So there goes that balance measure, there was none of that. So my children, I think Jamal came to my first board meeting at 4 months old, and I started the job as CEO a week before he turned 1. They grew up at the center. The center became the family. If I couldn't pick them up from after school, Claude went and did it, or somebody else did it. I needed many more people as a divorcee, because I got divorced, I want to say like 2 years after I started the job. And I was like, look, I can do bad by myself, so let me go ahead and do it. I had extraordinary child care when they were really young. And when they got to be 4.5, they were at EOYDC. Matter of fact, if I'm there and it's 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, Claude comes to me and says, do you mind if I get them some food and take them home? Like, go ahead. The other thing was that, my babysitters were youth leaders. First the kids followed me from St. Benedict's in the church, and then they were my youth leaders. I could actually go on trips with leaving some of my college kids in the house with my children. And I will tell you that I have coached some parents because for some reason, when you don't have a lot of money, you think, oh, kids ought to just be able to do what they do. I'm like, no. I say, they're living rent free. They need some chores. You need to model so that they don't think that this rule is just for them. If the TV is supposed to go off at 10, it goes off for everybody, So I believe in structure and discipline. I believe in tough love. How many of my kids know this firsthand, right? That's right, hands are high. But the thing about it is it's always love. It's I want better for you, but it's not do what I say and not what I do. So hopefully that answers your question. And guys, I need for you all to recognize, this is Pat Miles. When they were trying to overthrow me 2 years into EOYDC, Pat was the board president, told everybody, all y'all can leave. I just want to keep Regina.
Regina, I could tell you were mentored by my mom, because when you talk about your kids being at EOYDC, I was at every community meeting.
That's right.
Wondering why everybody was so angry.
Greetings, Miss Regina. Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for all that you all have shared today, and just thank you for your generosity of spirit as a leader, as a great, amazing Black woman, and just as who you are. I've had the pleasure of knowing you since I was 2 years old and started coming to the EOYDC in African dance class, which laid the foundation for me to perform all around the world. And also as a leader, you've supported me directly in the work I do as the co-founder and director of African American Female Excellence Initiative of OUSD. You have been an amazing force, not just in East Oakland, but in the entire Bay Area. And you've also continued to look amazing while doing it. And so, can we just give her a round of applause for the looks? Because I've been seeing this my entire life. My question for you, as I'm growing in my leadership and we're all dealing with a lot of heaviness that's in our community and a lot of challenges that we work with great organizations like yours to get resources for, but we have a lot of issues that are, the resources are dwindling, the problems are getting larger. So my question to you is, what is your advice for resilience and longevity as a leader in carrying such a heavy load of especially the emotional weight of what's impacting our communities, while also being able to maintain your self-care and your resilience and also not looking like the problems that we're working to solve?
Right.
I'm going to pay you later. So I will say that self-care was not on the agenda in the early years. I was just trying to do the work and do it well, recognizing that I had so many more blessings than the young people that I was serving, okay? The resilience, you just got to never say die. So long as there's a problem out there, I'm not trying to put on the Superman cape and say, I got the answer, but I got the questions. And oftentimes people who are suffering, they have some of the answers, they just don't have the resources to put them in place, right? And that's why I say school is where you start. Yes, home is also where you start, but I remember Cece, who was my child care worker, I went to pick up my children. I was almost always late, bless her. But I remember I was getting ready to take my son out, and he said, I opened the door, he was in the bathroom, he said, I need privacy. I didn't teach him that, she did. So again, look to your village for support systems. And if somebody is doing something wrong, pull them aside. Don't just crucify them and say it's wrong. Say, I've been in this circumstance and here's what I've done, so that they have an opportunity to learn. I hope I answered your question. Okay. All right. Thank you. And I'll see you tomorrow for coffee. Yes.
Good evening, my sister. I want to just thank you. I don't have a question, but I just want to thank you for pouring into my life, pouring into my children's life and my grandchildren. Your leadership, your love, and your longevity, as Sister Mina took my word, is the model and the example of how we need to love on our town. Thank you so much.
Hattie, thank you.
Now, y'all, this is the CEO of the Commonwealth Club World Affairs, and I'm not giving him the mic either.
Regina, it's great to have you here. Thank you for being here and gracing us with your presence. I want tell me about the youth you're seeing, okay? Many arguing the world as it is now is very different from the way it was 20, 30 years ago. I want to know from you, how are the youth coming through the same and different over the last 20 some years? And what are the challenges that they're going to have to face now in these very uncertain times, and how you've adjusted?
That's why he's CEO. He gives real hard questions. Excuse me. First off, I talked about this in my TED Talk, that usually when we first see kids, and that's whether they're 5 or 15, they're in survival mode. They are really suffering from PTSD because of all of the crime and stuff that's around them, the ambulances, the sirens, all of that. It's a trigger. People who are fighting wars, they get to go home, hopefully. So they don't get a break. After you deal with them, you embrace them, you tell them, we expect you to succeed and we're going to help you succeed. So then there's kind of an aha moment, like somebody sees me. Then you expose them, whether it's taking them to their first Warrior game or, whatever it is, or helping with their homework so they finally get better grades, because parents at home don't know how to do the homework. I didn't know how to do the homework. So, they keep changing it. Anyway, and within that, you help build some trust, right? What I'm not seeing that I saw when I first got there, I went to way too many funerals, way too many. And I had to stop going to them because they took so much out of me. I was like, I need to be here for the living, right? But what that, they may not be dead, but so much is being drawn out of them, right? You got the couch surfing, I'm eating French fry sandwiches, all of that kind of thing. But our kids are going to college. We traded backpacks. We traded, what are those things? The carriers, what you carry around the baby with. Nobody knows. Thank you, the stroller. We swapped strollers for backpacks. And that was a significant trajectory because a lot of kids didn't think they could do college because they didn't know anybody that had. And now they all know somebody. They know several somebodies because they are mentoring. They're getting mentored by them. Desan is already connected with Corday, who has claimed that he's going to Morehouse. And that's how we do. We put you in touch with so that there's a cascading mentoring process. Now, one of my parents called me and she told me, she said, How do I tell my children that telling the truth is still more important when we have somebody somewhere on high telling lies? And my point to her was kind of like my point when we had the firefighters come into the GED class. One student said, "Can I become a firefighter if I have a felony?" And the firefighter just simply kept it 1,000 and said no. So they had already cut their dream because of an action that they didn't know what consequence was connected to it. What we still try to do, even though there are so many programs for second chances, is say, you don't want the second chance. You don't want to slip on the banana peel. You don't want to jump over the BART because if somebody gets you, they're taking you. It's one of the reasons that in the police commission, our very first policy was probation and parole. And that was because, unfortunately, even after people do their time, they're still considered like, unrecognizable. They're not worth getting a second chance. We have got to change the psyches of how people think. It's like rich people sometimes get money from their families. They didn't earn that. It's like, when you're fortunate to have good skin. I didn't earn that. And so what is it that you are going to do in order to advance equity, social change, and positive identity formation? I am sure that the kids, and we used to have some bullying at the OIDC. We may still have it in bits and pieces, but we used to put that on Front Street, so to speak, to show what a bad action it is. Because nobody likes being bullied, and usually it's the bully who has been bullied who is bullying, right? And, when we have a problem with human trafficking, but I'm here to say that if we've had some kids who there have been attempts for them, and then they wanted to speak out. They wanted to speak out because they didn't want anybody else to have that experience. And that's in the midst of their shame, which was not deserved, and fear, right? It's share your story. Hope that it helps somebody else. And with college, it's all the scholarships in the world. It's keep working harder, keep working harder. And I'm sorry, that's just sweat equity is a thing that gets you places. And, we can get tired, we can get discouraged. Getting back to some self-care, I've been traveling the world since I was 16. One of the best gifts my parents ever gave me because they didn't want me to do the cotillion. But anyway, I travel, and even if it's traveling to get a massage or driving somewhere, I can get some peace, and we have to have that in our lives. We have to have people we can talk to that we can unburden ourselves with. And we also need to recognize that wherever we are, it can get worse and it can get better. So perhaps you need to decide. I remember them saying a couple weeks ago that people who have stock have been, making money on top of money. Well, guess who doesn't have stock? Young people. I can appreciate that program that was created for, the baby college or whatever, so that when you get to a certain age, you'll have $5,000. Put that in some stock. They'll have 5 times that. And it's also about teaching young people how to grieve, because oftentimes they can get do very questionable things because they're angry. Teaching young people how to save money and not feel like they gotta have the Jordans and whatever the cool thing is now, because you'll be okay without it. You gotta teach them how to live for the future as opposed to looking around every corner to see if they're gonna get past 25. There's a lot of heavy stuff we need to teach our young people, but love is a strategy.
So we're out of time.
Oh, Can I come back?
Yeah. Regina, I want to thank you for all that you poured into young people and into the community. I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom through this book and just invite everybody to give you a round of applause.